All right, welcome to the Daily Power Parsha. It's great to see you today. All right, let's jump right in. What we're going to do is we're going to explore the second and third readings of the Torah portion of Devarim, which is the opening portion of Devarim, aka Deuteronomy. So I explained yesterday that Deuteronomy is thus named because it's the second iteration of the law, if you will. It's because it says Moses is repeating the law to the Jewish people shortly before his passing. In the Hebrew, the fifth book of the Torah is known as Devarim. Devarim means words or themes, but in this case it means words. And what is it? Why is it called words? On a simple level, it's because these are the words that Moses spoke to the Jewish people. These are the things that he said before he passed away. But words, we know, have power. Words can create realities. Words can create and destroy. God created through language, and we know that human beings can destroy through language. So the fifth book of the Torah, being called Devarim, words, reminds us about the power of words and how words matter. What we say matters. What we articulate, what we put out in the world matters. There's another, along those lines, there's another angle on this book of Torah. I mentioned yesterday that the fifth book of Torah is written from a fundamentally different perspective or tone than the first four. Whereas the first four are written from the perspective of kind of a third-party narrator. Hi, Ray. A third-party narrator that is kind of removed from it all, who is kind of overseeing what's going on and talking about God and Moses. In Kabbalah, we would say, by the way, I didn't mention this yesterday, that who is the third-party narrator? It's God's essence beyond God's name. Again, Kabbalah will explain exactly what this means, but I'm giving you the short, like on 1 foot version of it. God's name is already God's names, plural, God has 7 names in Scripture. Those represent each of them a modality of God, but not God's essence. God's essence transcends any names. Just like you and I, we have our names, but then there's I beyond the name, which is the essence. You may know me by my name or label, but I know me from the inside out, and that transcends a name. The point is that the Torah is usually written from the perspective of God's essence beyond the name. So God's essence says, like the essence of God says, that Hashem spoke to Moses, or Elohim did this, that, or the other. So God's essence is talking about the names. But the fifth book of Torah is written from a fundamentally different vantage point, as I explained yesterday. It's expressed by Moses. And the laws are expressed by Moses as he repeats them. So Moses will say, and then God told me and instructed me regarding this, that mitzvah, and this is what it is. Or, don't forget to keep and observe that mitzvah, such and such. So what happens is that in this book of Torah, we have Jewish law, Torah and the mitzvot being articulated by a human being. Not in God's words, but in the words of Moses. Now, it's still a holy book. It's still the fifth book of Torah, but it represents a movement from top-down Torah transmission to bottom-up embracing of Torah. So that Torah is not just something being projected at us from above, but Torah is something that we speak its language. We are able to articulate it ourselves. And that's the power of the accomplishment of the fifth book of Torah. It opens up the opportunity for us to be live partners in the discussion of Torah, in the dissemination of Torah, in understanding Torah, and in observing it from our vantage point. So that's a little bit, again, about the fifth book of Torah, elaborating on what I started to explain yesterday. But let's jump in now to the text itself, because it's good to hear about, right? But it's even better sometimes to jump inside and see the text for itself. So today we're going to start the second reading. And it begins with Moses telling the people, at a certain point, I became very, what's the right word? I became very frustrated. And Moses says that I turned to God and I said, how can I bear, look at this opening verse, How can I bear your trouble, your burden, and your strife all by myself? Moses is revealing, right, his, what's the best way to say this? His frustration with the people. At a certain point in time, he said, I can't do this by myself. It's too much of a burden. There's too much kvetching, right? So it's dealing with one Jew is difficult, 2 Jews, 3 Jews, 2 million Jews. Are you kidding me? It's enough. One person can't do it. Therefore, Moses says that I told you, he's speaking to the people. Therefore, I said, prepare for yourselves wise and understanding men, basically, and I will make them heads over you. So this is where the tribal leadership comes in. Tribal, yes. She went out for a few minutes, she's coming back. Tribal leadership is inaugurated here. And what's the context? The context is to help alleviate the burden of leadership from Moses. The understanding is that it's not possible for one person to do it all. Everyone has to step up to the plate. This is on a tribal level, but also on an individual level. And that first line right here is so important, and it's so telling. How can I bear your trouble, your burden, your strife all by myself? It's not even about the negative stuff. It's one person can't be the only one in charge to make sure that things are staying the way they need to be. In other words, for Judaism, for Yiddishkeit, to keep on rolling forward, it can't just be, oh, well, we got Moses, so we don't need to take any responsibility. If we want a vibrant Jewish future, it's on all of us. It's not about a rabbi or a leader or a Moses. It's not about anyone else. It's about sharing the responsibility, but more than sharing, taking the responsibility. And now I want to do a reveal. And what's the reveal? The first Hebrew word of this reading is Eicha. Eicha esa levadi. How can I carry by myself your trouble, burden, and strife? Right? That is the opening word, Eicha. Eicha means how. But the word Eicha is also the first word of the Book of Lamentations. Megillat Eicha, the Book of Lamentations. And you know the Book of Lamentations was written by Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu Hanavi, as a lamentation about what is going to befall. It's a prophecy about what is going to befall the Jewish people when the temple is taken away from us. Or it's lamenting the fact that the temple was taken away from us, the first temple. And it's a book of sorrow. It's lamenting what we had and what we lost. The Book of Lamentations begins with the word Eicha. Eicha Yashva Badad. Alas, how she sits alone. Jerusalem sits bereft of all its inhabitants, having been destroyed by the enemy. This is how the Book of Lamentation begins. This Book of Lamentations, known as Megillat Eicha, the scroll of Eicha, because that's the word that it begins with, the Book of Lamentations is read on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. Tomorrow is the first day of the Jewish month of Av. 9 days later will be the 9th day of Av. And the 9th day of Av is the day in which both temples were destroyed. And it's the day in which we read Megillas Eicha, the Book of Lamentations. So here's the question. How does a temple get destroyed? How do a people lose everything they had? From the times of Abraham, they were promised to have the Holy Land. From the times of Moses, they were promised to have a temple. So how does it all go away? How is it all taken away? You know what the answer is? This verse right here. Eicha explains Eicha. This Eicha that Moses says explains the Eicha of Lamentations. How do you get to the loss? God forbid. It's when people don't take responsibility for themselves. It's when people think, oh, Moses needs to take care. Moses needs to be the one. If we need a mitzvah done, let Moses do it. Right? It's like, and Moses prayed for me. Moses wrapped tefillin for me. Moses light Shabbat. There's no one else other than us, right? It's not about Moses. It's about you and I taking responsibility. So when morality, when ethics, when spirituality is presented as something that is about someone else or on someone else's shoulders, they need to worry about it, but not us. that's when it could lead to the most negative and dire of consequences. So what's the positive message? The positive message, if we want to undo the negative eicha, we need to take responsibility for ourselves and our families and rock and roll with Yiddishkeit, with Judaism, Torah, and mitzvot. All right, that's one point. Moses continues to talk about the delegation of leadership, right? So we had different levels of leaders. There were heads of tribes. There were leaders over thousands, leaders over hundreds, leaders over 50s, leaders over 10s, right? So many different layers of leadership, Jewish leadership, and officers. Don't forget the officers, right? Make sure law and order is set forth in a proper way. Then Moses talks about the judges, how it's important to have law and order, not only officers to enforce the law, but judges that will go ahead and examine the law. So here we have the commandment that Moses says, I gave to the judges, hear disputes between your brothers and judge justly between a man and his brother and between his litigant. You shall not favor persons in judgment. Rather, you shall hear the small just as the great. In other words, it's easy to be tempted. I think we spoke about this a number of weeks ago. It's easy to be tempted if you're a judge to, there's somebody who's powerful and mighty and someone who's the little person, so to speak. It's easy to say, well, I want to curry favor with the powerful person, so therefore I'm going to bend judgment to their direction. No. Moses says, again, this is Moses speaking in the first person. He says, I told the judges, do not favor people in judgment. Hear the small just as the great. You shall not fear any man, for the judgment is upon the Lord, and the case that is too difficult for you, bring to me, and I will hear it. What this is saying is, for the judgment is upon the Lord. What that means is, if you don't judge justly, then it's not only a problem for you, but you're messing with God, because God is ultimately the one who wants justice done. And if you're judging unjustly, then that's an affront to God Almighty himself. And then Moses says, there are consequences for this. The case that's too difficult for you, bring to me. Right? So a system of lower courts, and then the highest court. Moses was on the highest court. So let the lower courts deal with the lower cases. If it's really difficult, then bring it to me. This, our sages say, is one of the reasons why when it came to, for example, the daughters of Tzalafchad. Remember last week or 2 weeks ago, we read about the 5 daughters of Tzalafchad who their father died, there were no brothers, and they asked for a piece of the land of Israel. And Moses says, let me take it to God and ask God. And then God says, give it to them. Okay, so the commentaries discuss, why didn't Moses just answer them? I mean, it's obvious, there's no sons, just give it to the daughters. I mean, what's the problem? So some say, well, because he felt bribed, because they told him, oh, our father liked you. He didn't go against you. So he was not impartial anymore. But some say very simply, or not simply, but it was a punishment that he forgot the answer to that case, because Moses here said, the case is too difficult for you, bring to me. That could be construed as a bit of an ego statement. If you have any problems, bring it to me. I got all the answers. So Hashem says, you're still a human being. You're Moses, but you're still a human being. I'm going to orchestrate things that when it comes to one case, you're going to forget the law and you'll need to come to me. Just so you know that it's not like any case that's too difficult, bring to me, bring to Moses. All right, God puts even Moses, in his place on some level, and that's why Moses forgets the law, according to some commentaries, with the case of the daughters of Tzalafchad. Now Moses, in his oral history, again, 37 days, every day, he talks to the people. Every day, he guides them, he instructs them, he gives his final will and testament. And now he talks about the sin of the spies. We read about it a few weeks ago, but that was 40 years prior. Remember, the sin of the spies happened, and that's why they wandered for 40 years. So now he's going back 40 years and recalling what happened. We journeyed from Horeb, that's Sinai, and went through that great and fearful desert, and we came to Kadesh Barnea. And it was about time to enter the land. Let's jump to reading number 3. Look at this. You ready? We get more details. Deuteronomy adds more details to the spy story. Look what Moses says clearly. And all of you approached me and said, let us send men ahead of us, so that they will search out the land for us and bring us back word by which route we shall go up and to which cities we shall come. In other words, the idea of spies came from the people. We don't get that clearly in the book of Numbers when we read it from the third-party narrator. It says just Moses sent spies. It wasn't clear as to how that transpired. But as Moses, 40 years later, is speaking to the people and recalling the incident of the spies, he clearly mentions that this was not my idea. This was not God's idea. This was all y'all's idea. You came to me. I think I pulled that one off nicely. You came to me and said, oh, let's send men, let's send spies. They'll tell us how to go, where to go. And then Moses takes responsibility. He does take responsibility. And the matter pleased me. In other words, I did consent. I could have said no. You didn't force me. I agreed. So I took 12 men, one for each tribe. I mean, we know the end of the story, right? But it's interesting to hear how Moses relates it 40 years later. And they turned and went up to the mountain, came to the valley of Eshcol, and they spied it. And they took some of the fruit of the land in their hands and brought back word and said, the land the Lord our God is giving us is good. By the way, as I read it, I'm paraphrasing a little bit. I hope you know I'm not noticing that I'm skipping words sometimes when I read. I'm just trying to make it a little bit quicker. But you did not, this is Moses speaking to the people. This is Moses speaking to the people before his passing. But you did not want to go up to Israel, and you rebelled against the commandment of the Lord your God. Look at this one. Look at this one. This hurts. I mean, this stings. You murmured in your tents. Moses says, you don't think I know what you guys are talking about? You don't think I know what you're talking about in your tents? I got spies. I'm kidding. Moses says, you murmured in your tents and said, because the Lord hates us, he took us out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to exterminate us. Look at that. Talk about the power of the mind. Let me explain what's going on here. Moses is saying, I know what you were talking about in your tents that night after the spies came back. You're saying God hates us. He wants to kill us. And the truth couldn't be more further from that position. What was the truth? God loved the people. God loved the people. He rescued them from Egypt. He split the sea for them, gave them the Torah, and was about to give them literally the promised land. And nothing changed. What changed? They changed. And instead of being grateful and being excited, you know what they said? God hates us and he's trying to kill us. And that's it. They poisoned their own minds. And once they poisoned their own minds, everything broke, everything fell, and disaster ensued. This is a massive cautionary tale. A person could be loved by someone else and be the beneficiary of tremendous blessing, but in their own mind, they look at it as hate. You hate me, you hate us, and that poisons everything. The mind is a very, very powerful, for good and for bad, very powerful tool. And they continue to say, where shall we go up? Our brothers have discouraged us, saying a people greater and taller than we, cities greater and fortified up to the heavens. We've even seen the sons of Anakim, giants there. Moses says now, again, this is Moses, all Moses talking. And I said to you, see this phrase you would never find in the first 4 books of Torah. You just wouldn't. Moses says, and then I said to you, do not be broken or afraid. The Lord will fight for you, just as he did in Egypt. And in the desert, God has carried you as a man carries his son. Right? Moses says, it's not even like Exodus. It's right now, today. How are you eating? Manna from heaven. How are you protected from the heat and the sun and the cold at night? Clouds of glory. God is literally, or figuratively, carrying you on his back. God's protecting you. And you don't think he can take into Israel? You don't think he loves you? But regarding this matter, Moses continues, you did not believe. You do not. Oh, he's saying it in the present tense, even though it's a story that happened 40 years prior. He says, you don't believe in the Lord your God, or you didn't, who goes before you on the way to search out a place for you in which to encamp and fire at night, to be able to see the way you should go, and in a cloud by day. A reference that we spoke about several weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, that there was a fire that traveled at night, or rested on the cloud at night and in a cloud by day. Sorry, let me say that. I don't think I said that right. A fire that rested on the camp at night and a cloud by day. Fire so that you can see at night, a big nightlight, and a cloud to protect against the sun. It's good to have cloud cover when you're in the desert for 40 years or even for a day. So you were complaining. What happens next? And the Lord heard the sounds of your words. God knows what you're talking about in your tents. And he became angry and swore, saying, if any of these men of this evil generation sees the good land, which I swore to give your forefathers, if any of these men see the land means no one of this generation. It's not an if, it's just a biblical way of saying it ain't going to happen. None of these men will see the good land, which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, except for two people, Caleb and except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he will see it, and I will give him the land that he trod upon and to his children, because he has completely followed the Lord. He was a good spy, a spy that stayed true to God. And Moses says, look at 37, interjects before we get to the second person, Joshua. Moses interjects, the Lord was also angry with me because of you, saying, neither will you go there. Yeah, it officially came down when Moses hit the rock, which we read about a few weeks ago. But from that moment of the spies, 40 years prior, it was already in the cards that I was not going to go into the land of Israel. Moses says, God was also angry with me because of you. At the end of the day, Moses consented to sending the spies. At the end of the day, that mission failed. And look, the commander-in-chief takes responsibility and is held accountable. So the mission failed. The mission blew up. Who sent the mission? Moses. God said, Moses says at that time, God already told me, basically, essentially, I'm done. I'm not going in because of you. All right. Verse 38, one more exception to the no, not this generation rule, but Joshua, the son of Nun, he was the other spy that remained true, who stands before you. He will go there to Israel. Strengthen him, God told me. Yeah. Look at verse 37. The Lord was also angry with me, saying, this is all part of what God was saying to me, says Moses. You will not go there, but Joshua, son of Nun, he will go there. Therefore, God told me, says Moses, strengthen him, give him chizuk, chazak, chazak, give him strength. Joshua, the son of Nun, for he will cause Israel to inherit the land of Israel. All right, that takes us to the end of today's reading. So today we did Monday and Tuesday's reading, 2 and 3. It's very much narrative. As you can see here, it's very much storytelling. There are parts of Deuteronomy that get very much detailed in Jewish law as Moses repeats it. But here you have kind of Moses laying the historical account to then turn around to this generation that is about to enter the land and say, please don't make the same mistakes. Learn from the past, learn from history, and do not repeat the same mistakes. It's very important to know where we're coming from or where they were coming from so that they should know where they need to be heading and how to avoid the mistakes of the past. So let me recap a few, I think, timeless personal lessons that we can extract from what we spoke about today. Just to summarize, let me go back to the second reading. Number one, I mentioned the importance of everyone being accountable and taking responsibility for whatever is good in this world, whether morality, spirituality, Yiddishkeit, Judaism, whatever is important. If it's important, then we need to own it. We should never put it on Moses, on the rabbi, on the federation. It's not on anyone else's shoulders. It's on our shoulders. If we want, and this is true globally also, it's not just Jewishly. If you and I want a better world, it begins with us. We should never think, oh, unless someone else does something, then nothing's going to happen. What about us? We also can change things, at least for ourselves, starting from. So, message number one is Moses should not be carrying everybody himself. Eicha. How can I carry? Moses says, Eicha is the first word of the Book of Lamentations. In a society where no one takes responsibility, it ends in disaster. It ends with lamentation. That was the first point I mentioned. The next point was about delegation. I didn't mention this specifically, but it's important to delegate. Moses creates a system of delegation, different levels of leadership. So a good leader knows how to delegate and how to share influence and spread the influence around. I spoke about the importance of, or I noted what Moses says. These are Moses' insights. So I mentioned that Moses reiterates the importance of of judging justly. If you're a judge, you are representing God on earth because God is into justice. If you're a judge, then you're representing God's justice on earth. Make sure it's kosher justice and not fraudulent in any way. We spoke about the notion of Moses saying, if there's any difficult cases, bring it to me, and how that was a little bit of ego, and how therefore some say that that's why he forgot the law when it came to the daughters of Tzalafchad, and why he had to turn it over to God to answer. God says, really, you'll answer all the questions? I'm going to give you one that you won't, for whatever reason, you won't be able to answer. And so that was kind of a recompense for that statement. And then we spoke about the third reading where Moses, pardon the interruption, where Moses recalls the episode of the Spies, takes responsibility for signing off on it, acknowledges what went wrong, talks about how the people felt like God hated them. And that's a heavy word, hate. Once they felt that God hated them, then everything became bad. The manna's no good, the clouds are too dark, the fire's too hot, nothing is right. Once you're soured on something or someone, then there's nothing they can do right. Once they believe that the Lord hated them, that was it. It was over. That relationship was done. So that was it. And now Moses reminds them of, that's where it's turning. It's turning to the point where Moses is saying, don't make that mistake in the future. Tomorrow we'll be doing the fourth reading. Let me just pull this up over here. Okay, tomorrow we're going to look at that. Good.
Rabbi.
Yes, Ray, go ahead.
Why did I think it was Jethro who, when he saw Moshe's burdens, taught him how to do, like, this one will take these problems, this one will take those. It wasn't Jethro?
100%. You're 100% right. It was his father-in-law who gave that advice initially to create a system of courts, lower courts and higher courts, an escalating system of courts, correct. And that is clarified in the Torah portion known as Yisro, in the book of Exodus. Why isn't it mentioned here? I'm not sure, but that was where that idea came from. Moses is mentioning what he did, not necessarily where the idea came from. Why does he omit it? I don't think he's trying to take credit for himself. I think he's just telling the story of how practically what he did when he was frustrated with all the burdens that were on him. But yeah, you're 100% correct. By the way, you know what the message is? Sometimes you're allowed to listen to your father-in-law. I'm saying sometimes. Sometimes it's Mark.
Rabbi, could you clarify something for me?
Absolutely.
Because what right. Rashi says, it says as a man carries his son. And Rashi said, I've explained at the angel of God who has been going in front of the camp of Israel. It says this can be compared to one who is going along the road and his son is in front of him. I would think that you say the angel is in front of Israel, the father would be in front of the son. I don't understand that.
Let me pull it up. Here, take a look. This may be compared to one who is traveling on a road with his son in front of him. If bandits come to kidnap the son, he removes him from in front of him and places him behind him. See that? The brackets here are very important.
Okay.
And when he's in front of him, he is vulnerable. So when danger arrives, he then puts him behind him. In other words, God is looking out for us. So when there's a danger, God goes before us.
Cool.
In the Hebrew, it says v'chulu, which means etc. So it's intentionally leaving out some stuff. Let's see if I can find the original instance, because Rashi mentions that he explained this earlier. So let me click on the hyperlink. Let's see if this works. You ready? Live Torah jumping. I'm going to hit Exodus 14:19, and let's see what comes up. We're going to do this together. Okay, let's toggle Rashi's commentary. Show. Verse 19, and let's see what happens. Here we go.
I see the angel.
And went behind them. Yeah, so the angel of God, here we go. The angel of God who had been going in front of the Israelite camp moved and went behind them. Okay, let's see. To separate between the Egyptian camp and the Israelite camp, and to catch the arrows of the Egyptians. Sorry, this one. And he came between the camp of Egypt. Okay, this can be compared to a person walking along the road with his son, walking in front of him. When the bandits came to capture his son. So here Rashi says clearly, he was referencing it there to this. When the bandits came to capture the son, he took him from in front of him, placed him behind him. Oh, it gets better. And a wolf came behind him. Oh, it's not so simple. What do you mean? It's not just a bandit, it's now a wolf. Oh, what an adventure. A wolf came behind him, so he put him in front of him. When the bandits came in front of him and what was behind him, now you got a double whammy. He put him on his arms, basically put him on his shoulders. He held him and he fought them off. Imagine your favorite kung fu movie, that the hero has a kid on his shoulders. That's upping the ante. Now, like a Bruce Lee situation with a kid on your back. Similarly, the prophet depicts the angel protecting Israel. But I sent the train as follows. But I sent the train of Ephraim, that's referring to the Jews, and he took them on his arms. Okay, basically, it's not safe in front. The bandits in front, it might not be safe behind. You got wolves back there. So on top, is it on top of an angel, on top of God? I mean, these are all spiritual. It's not literal anyway. It just means that God protected us. But it's important to understand the bigger idea here, which is like it's Moses is pointing out how meshugah this whole thing is. God loves you, he's caring for you, and inside your tents, what are you saying? God hates us. What? It's terrible. Then what do you do? I mean, it becomes. I don't even know what you do in that case. Like if someone's caring for you and giving you everything, and the attitude on the other side is you hate me. There's not much to do. Anyway, that's why that generation didn't go into the land. It was only the next generation. Moses wanted to make sure that this new generation that was going into the land would never make the same mistakes as their parents. Did it work? We lost the temple, so I'll let you guess if human nature got the better of us at some point. Moses can only do what he does, but like he said at the first verse that we studied, we have to do it. Moses can give the good advice, but then we have to embrace it. That's what we're working on. Okay, great to see you all today. Tomorrow, same bad time, same bad channel, and I look forward to studying with you in the morrow. Have a wonderful day.
Right.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.